The Bible, besides being a spiritual book, is also one of the greatest manuals on mindset, behavior, and choices. And when it comes to wealth, a lot of people forget that there are characters in that book who not only had possessions, but knew how to deal with wealth in a way that few people today understand. In this content, we're going to look at the richest women in the Bible, not to idolize their money, but to understand what they knew, how they thought, and what you can learn to start transforming your own mind. The first thing you need to understand is that wealth never starts in your pocket. It starts in the way you think. The mind of a wealthy person works differently, and that has nothing to do with studying investments or opening a business. It's the way of seeing the world, the way of thinking every day. These women of the Bible had a mindset that refused to live in scarcity. Even in difficult situations, they did not surrender to the thought that, I can't, I'm not able, I don't have. They knew something many ignore, that what you cultivate inside you over time shows up on the outside, and that goes for both poverty and prosperity. Some of these women were widows, others lived in times when women didn't have the same space or freedom as today. But even so, they managed to grow, accumulate wealth, make financial decisions, and leave eternal marks. How was that possible? The answer lies in three attitudes that repeat in all of them. They knew what they wanted, they maintained a rational faith in what they could achieve, and they did not let scarcity take over their minds. What you believe about yourself is more powerful than any external crisis or difficulty. Before continuing with the teachings, make sure you've already subscribed to the channel. But only do this if you believe you were born to eat the best of this land. If you believe that, say out loud now, I am ready to prosper. This is more than a phrase. It's a starting point. You need to hear yourself saying this. You need to feel the energy of the decision. The decision to stop sabotaging yourself, to stop settling for little, to stop living with a mind drowned in fear of not having. Start by declaring that you are ready to prosper. Many people read Bible stories thinking they're just ancient tales. But if you start paying attention to the attitudes, the choices, and especially the thoughts behind these stories, you'll see that the mindset of these women is extremely current. One of them, for example, had the courage to invest everything she had without knowing what tomorrow would be like. Another used her emotional intelligence to create a strategy that changed the future of an entire nation. None of them waited for the world's permission to think big. And this is a point you need to understand now. No one is going to give you permission to prosper. Either you decide to grow on your own, or you'll spend your entire life waiting for a sign that never comes. Most people live mentally locked. They believe they can't be rich because they were born in a poor place, because they don't have schooling, because their salary is low. Except the wealthy mind doesn't look at where it is. It looks at where it wants to go. That's exactly what these women did. They were aware that life is made of mental choices before anything else, and one of the greatest traps of scarcity is making you believe that your reality defines your value. If you don't break this belief, you'll never get out of the same place. Write in the comments now, I refuse to live in scarcity. It may seem simple, but every time you declare something like that, your mind starts working at a new frequency. It's as if you opened a new window inside your head, and everything starts to change when this new way of thinking becomes routine. It's habit, and habit creates destiny. The richest women in the Bible didn't think big once in a while. They had this pattern as a lifestyle. They didn't settle for crumbs even when the world tried to push that on them. You need to understand that the world is not going to stop to teach you how to think like the rich. No one is going to knock on your door and say, here's the formula for your prosperity. This has to come from within. When you start feeding your mind with thoughts of abundance every day, when you refuse to repeat phrases like, money is hard, I'm poor but honest, the rich won't go to heaven, you begin to free yourself from the invisible chains of scarcity. And that liberation is the first step to any true transformation. Now think about this. How many times have you had good ideas, big dreams, a desire to grow, and right after that came a thought of doubt, of fear, of this isn't for me? Do you know why that happens? Because the mind is conditioned to reject what is bigger than the usual. The poor mind can't sustain a thought of greatness for long. It sabotages. It seeks the comfort of scarcity because that's what it knows. That's why changing your mindset is so important. You need to get used to the idea of wealth. You need to repeat it every day until it becomes part of who you are. These women knew this. They didn't just have faith, they had vision. They saw possibilities where others saw lack, and that's what you need to practice. See beyond what is visible. Start building a mind that seeks solutions, not excuses. A mind that gets up every day and says, "Today I take one more step toward my wealth," even if the step is small, even if no one sees it. What matters is what is being built inside you. Wealth starts with how you see yourself. When you start to see yourself as someone who deserves the best, who can have the best, who was born to grow, your mind begins to work in your favor. It will filter new opportunities, steer you away from bad choices, start to notice what you didn't even see before. That's the secret. The richest women in the Bible weren't special by luck. They were different in the way they thought. And that is something anyone can develop, including you. You just have to decide. Many times when talking about prosperity, the focus goes only to techniques, formulas, or even external paths. But what you learn by observing these women is that the secret wasn't in something they did from the outside in. The secret was always inside them, a mental strength that went beyond limitations, judgments, and even the laws of the time. They didn't wait for someone to open the door to wealth. They built that door with their own thinking, with firm decision, with internal attitude. What's most impressive is that they had every reason to give up. In times when women had almost no rights, where society was dominated by men, where poverty was common, and opportunities were few, they still stood out. This proves that wealth does not depend on the setting. It depends on the lens you place over that setting. The poor mind will always seek justifications to stay as it is. The rich mind seeks ways out, and that takes training. You need to train your mind every day to look with a focus on abundance, not with eyes of scarcity. Let's talk about a woman well known for her courage and wisdom. She had resources, made business decisions, was respected for her intelligence. But more than that, she was mentally prepared to multiply what she had. She wasn't someone who just waited for time to pass. She acted, but she acted with clarity. That's what separates those who are always tight from those who begin to prosper. Clarity. Those who have clarity about who they are, what they want, and what they deserve, hardly surrender to mediocrity. The wealth these women carried was built on the habit of thinking firmly, speaking with conviction, taking action without fear of others' judgment. This is something many people today lack. Most are afraid of seeming greedy, afraid of being criticized, afraid of being rejected for wanting more. But if you live in fear of being misunderstood, you'll end up being misunderstood by yourself. You'll start pruning yourself, hiding your dreams, shrinking your desires to fit in other people's heads. And those who do that never prosper. These women did not shrink their dreams to please anyone. They stood their ground with strength, and it wasn't arrogance. It was awareness of value. When you understand that you deserve the best, you don't bow your head to scarcity. You don't accept just anything. And here's a truth that may bother you. Many people are living below what they deserve, not because they lack ability, but because they got used to little. They're so used to the struggle, the tightness, the constant worry over bills, that they can no longer even imagine what a different life would be like. And there is the first step to change. You need to imagine. You need to allow your mind to see what is not yet reality. You need to create mental images of yourself living in abundance, with peace, with financial security, with choices, because that's what money gives you. Choice. It's not about luxury, it's about freedom. Freedom to say yes or no without fear. Freedom to help whomever you want. Freedom to live lightly. But as long as you think wanting money is wrong, as long as you repeat phrases planted in your mind by frustrated people, you will remain stuck. Say out loud now, "I am worthy of a rich life." This is not ego. This is affirmation. And the mind needs it. It needs to hear, it needs to believe. If you never affirm what you desire, your mind will keep operating on the same old patterns. And poor patterns produce poor results. Change the programming, and the results start to change too. And don't wait to feel it's true before you start declaring it. First you speak, then you begin to feel, and when you feel, you'll act like someone who is already at this new level. These women knew how to handle money because they weren't afraid of it. They knew how to manage because they knew how to receive. And they knew how to receive because they never doubted their own value. Doubt is the greatest block that exists. Every time you doubt if you can, if you deserve, if you're able, you paralyze your growth energy. That's why it's so important to train your mind with thoughts of certainty. Certainty builds paths, doubt destroys them. And yes, you can train this. You can decide today to stop saying I can't and start saying I haven't arrived yet, but I'm on my way. Some of these women lost everything, but recovered. Others started with nothing and built empires. This proves that origin does not define destiny. What defines it is what you do with what you think. The right thought in the wrong mind is useless. You need to adjust the foundation. You need to start seeing yourself as someone capable. And that requires repetition. Every day. It's not about getting motivated by a video and forgetting afterward. It's about making it a habit, a way of thinking, a way of living. Wealth is not a prize. It's a mindset. Grab a piece of paper now or open your phone's notes app and write, "My mind is adjusting to wealth." Write it down for real. Don't leave it just in your head. Writing is a way of imprinting this new reality. The more you practice this kind of action, the more your mind will accept the idea of growth. It will stop resisting. It will begin to seek out paths, people, situations that confirm what you are affirming. This is the power of mentalization. It's not magic, it's logic. You think, you feel, you act, and then the result arrives. These women use their minds as tools. They knew when to speak, when to be silent, when to take a step, and when to wait. This is called emotional intelligence, and it comes from the habit of thinking before acting, aligning thought with decision. And you can do this too. Start slowly, but start. Stop repeating that things are hard. Stop saying you're always broke. Start declaring that you're learning to prosper, that you're adjusting your mind, that you're freeing yourself from the invisible chains of scarcity, because only then do you change your energy and everything around you starts to change too. The greatest revolution starts within. No external transformation holds when the internal structure is weak. And that's what the richest women of the Bible showed with their attitudes. They had a firm mental structure. It wasn't just about blind faith or a desire to have material goods. It was a firmness of thought that kept them centered, even when everything around them seemed to be falling apart. This is what most people today don't understand. They want wealth, but with a fragile mind. And a fragile mind will never sustain an abundant life. The fragile mind is easily offended, compares itself, sabotages itself, gives in to doubt. A trained, strong, firm mind knows what it wants and keeps moving in that direction, even when nothing cooperates. You need to start strengthening your mind if you want to experience what these women experienced. And this does not start with motivation, it starts with discipline. The discipline to think right, even when everything screams the opposite. The discipline to repeat affirmations of prosperity, even when the account is at zero. The discipline to not accept misery as a natural part of life. These women were not victims of the time they lived in. They didn't hide behind culture, the lack of opportunity, or the limitations that society imposed. They acted. They thought strategically. They did not cast themselves as pitiful. And this is a powerful attitude you need to develop now. Stop casting yourself as a victim. Stop repeating the story of scarcity as if it were your identity. What you've lived up to now doesn't define who you are. It only defines where you were. What will define your future is the way you think from today onward. Have you noticed that when a person thinks like the poor, everything in their life confirms that mindset? They get involved with small problems, worry about things that make no difference, argue over nonsense, fight over small change, live in fear of losing the little they have. This isn't about money. It's about the mind. A small mind produces a small life. And the only way to change this is by expanding what you believe about yourself. The rich women of the Bible did not accept crumbs. They had the posture of those who knew their own value, and that is exactly what you need to develop. Write in the comments now, "I choose to think like a wealthy person." It doesn't matter how much you have in your pocket today. What matters is what you carry in your head, because what's in there will determine what will appear on the outside. Start repeating this to yourself every day. Build the habit of hearing yourself affirm good things. And more. Start paying attention to the words you use without noticing. Every time you say "I can't," that it's hard, that this isn't for me, you are feeding the root of scarcity. And the more you feed that, the more stuck you become. These women knew how to turn difficult situations into opportunities. One of them, for example, was able to take a risky action at a time when any mistake would cost a life. But she did not hesitate. She trusted the direction she had inside her. That's what you need to build. An internal conviction so strong it makes you act, even in the face of fear. Because fear will show up. It's part of it. But those with a wealthy mind don't let fear rule. They use fear as a sign that they're leaving the comfort zone, and they keep going anyway. You may even have learned since you were little that money is dirty, that the rich are greedy, that the right thing is to live with little. But now it's your responsibility to break these lies. Yes, they are lies. Lies that keep thousands of people stuck in a reality they didn't choose, they just inherited. But what you inherit is no excuse for what you choose to live. You can reprogram your mind. And this starts now, with small actions. Change the way you speak. Change the way you look at money. Change the way you see yourself. Repeat out loud now, I am building a wealthy mind. It may seem simple, but this is powerful. Because when you start repeating phrases like that, you're creating new connections in your brain. You're telling yourself there is a new direction. You're moving away from old patterns. And that's how true transformation starts. Not with big events, but with small thoughts that repeat until they become strong beliefs. And once those beliefs become part of you, no one can take them away. These women had vision. They didn't see only the present. They looked at what they could build. They didn't live stuck in yesterday, nor did they limit themselves to the now. That's a wealthy mindset, thinking long-term, thinking legacy, thinking continuous growth. You need to develop this. Stop living putting out fires, solving problem after problem. Start thinking about what you want to build 5 years, 10 years from now, even if today it seems far away. What matters is planting the thought. Then comes the feeling. Then comes the action. And then the result appears. The greatest wealth these women carried was not in the amount of gold or land. It was in clarity. They knew what they wanted. They knew who they were. They knew where they were going. And no one could take that away. Because clarity creates power. And power attracts resources. Lost people who don't know what they want keep jumping from idea to idea, from dream to dream, and never accomplish anything. You need to stop now and ask yourself, do I know what I want? If not, start finding out. Because only those who know what they want can see opportunities when they appear. You don't need to become someone different. You need to become who you are, without the fear, without the guilt, without the shame of wanting to grow. Growing is natural. Prospering is natural. Scarcity is an anomaly. It's a mental state that's been accepted for far too long, and now you have the chance to break that, to decide to think like the rich, to speak like the rich, to act like the rich. Even before you have money. Because money is the consequence, it comes afterward. What comes first is the internal change, and that is 100% under your control. Most people believe that wealth is in the hands of a few, as if it were a privilege reserved for a select group who were born under ideal conditions. This belief is so rooted in most people's minds that it has become a truth for many. But it isn't true. It's just programming. And the good news is that any programming can be changed. The change begins when you understand that wealth is not a blood inheritance, but an inheritance of mindset. And that's exactly what the most prosperous women in the Bible understood. They chose how to think. Yes, they chose because thought is not something automatic. You can control what you think, and that control is the starting point for building an abundant life. These women didn't let themselves be carried away by external voices. They knew how to silence the noise of the world to hear what was inside. They knew how to discern what was worth feeding. And this is one of the most important habits for those who want to prosper. Knowing what to feed. Because the mind is like fertile soil. Everything you plant there grows. If you plant scarcity, you reap scarcity. If you plant greatness, you reap prosperity. Scarcity is fed every day in small phrases, small behaviors, small gestures. When you say something is expensive, when you think it won't work, when you look with envy at those who have more, you're feeding scarcity. And every time that happens, your mind gets further from the idea that you can be rich too. These women didn't cultivate envy. They didn't compare themselves. They didn't waste time on what others had or didn't have. They were focused on growing, multiplying, developing what they had in their hands. And here's an essential point. They were good stewards. This doesn't mean they did calculations or had spreadsheets, but that they knew how to take care of what they had. They knew how to value it. They knew how to look at something small and treat it as if it were big. Because those who don't value the little will never respect the much. And this applies to money, to time, to ideas. Many people complain about their financial life but have no discipline with the few resources they have today. They spend without thinking, speak ill of money, live in conflict with reality. This only deepens the cycle of scarcity. These women knew how to do what many people don't: take good care of what they have, even if it's little. This creates a mental pattern of responsibility. Prosperity loves responsibility. Money runs from those who mistreat it, who don't know how to use it, who see it as a problem. Have you noticed how many people say that the more money, the more problems? That phrase alone shows the level of wrong programming that exists, because in truth, the more money, the more freedom, more possibility, more resources to create a better life. But that only happens for those with the right mindset. You need to re-educate yourself. You need to stop and observe how you think about money, how you talk about it, how you feel when dealing with it. If every time you see someone prospering you feel discomfort, if when you think about having a lot of money you feel guilt or fear, that's a sign your mind is not yet prepared. And while the mind is not prepared, nothing holds. You may even have moments of improvement, but soon everything goes back to what it was before. Because the mind always tries to return to the level of thought where it feels safe. That's why you need to expand that level. Say out loud now, "My mind is prepared to manage wealth, not just to desire it, but to manage it." Because those who don't prepare to take care of it, lose it. The women of the Bible were not just dreamers, they were caretakers. And that needs to get inside you. It's no use desiring wealth if you keep treating your current reality like trash. Start valuing what you have. Be grateful, be organized. Take good care of small things. This creates an energy of abundance around you. And abundance respects those who respect it first. Another thing these women did was use intelligence to open paths. They didn't wait for open doors. They created their own exits. They thought, observed, decided. And all of this came from an active mind. They weren't stuck in the fear of making mistakes. Because those who fear making mistakes freeze. And those who freeze miss opportunities. There is no growth without movement. And movement begins in the mind. You need to allow yourself to think differently. Stop repeating yourself all the time. Stop thinking that what you live today is all that exists. Scarcity makes you forget that there are other levels of life. It traps you in a cycle of repeating bills, problems, worries, as if nothing would change. And it won't change while the thought remains the same. The richest women in the Bible had a mind turned toward the new. They didn't stay stuck on what went wrong. They learned, adjusted, and moved on. This is a habit, the habit of growing, the habit of not stopping, the habit of not accepting less than they deserve. And you can learn all this too, but you need to truly want it. Right now in the comments, "I am learning to think like the rich." This is part of your process. This shows your mind that you are active, that you're not just listening, but practicing, that you're feeding the new. And each time you declare this, the idea gains more strength inside you. And the day will come when you won't need to repeat it anymore, because you will already feel it as a natural part of your thinking. You will become who you were created to be, a free, whole, and prosperous person. These women knew this. They knew that the greatest wealth is the conviction that you deserve the best. They did not bow to scarcity, and you don't have to bow anymore either. Start today to think differently, speak differently, feel differently, act differently, and watch how little by little your reality will also begin to change. When you begin to study the stories of these women carefully, you notice something that may go unnoticed by most. They knew exactly when to act. They weren't driven by haste or anxiety. They knew how to wait. They knew how to analyze, and most importantly, they knew when it was time to rise. And that, incredibly, has everything to do with prosperity. Because prosperity doesn't go with imbalance. Prosperity is synonymous with clarity, presence, internal control, and only a well-aligned mind achieves that. These women did not make decisions based on fear. They made decisions based on the conviction of what they wanted to build, and that's what many people lack today. Most live putting out fires, chasing debt, solving problems that never end. And why? Because the thinking is always turned toward what's going wrong. Those who focus on what's wrong only see more problems. Those who focus on what they want to build start finding solutions. These women had that kind of focus, and that's what you need to train every day. To build wealth, you need to stop reacting and start choosing. Reacting is living on the basis of emotion, pressure, desperation. Choosing is acting with awareness. It's understanding the impact of what you think, what you say, what you do, and this awareness transforms everything. The rich women of the Bible had this heightened awareness. They observed, studied the environment, reflected. They didn't act on impulse, and because of this, every move they made had weight, had purpose. Those who live without purpose live on autopilot. And autopilot is the shortest path to staying where you are. How many times have you made financial decisions on impulse? Bought something you didn't need just to relieve angst? Got into debt to impress someone? Failed to invest in something important for fear of making a mistake? That's a scarcity mindset. Scarcity makes you chase momentary relief. Abundance teaches you to wait for the right time, to decide with intelligence, to do what is necessary, not what is easy. And this kind of mindset is trainable. You can build it even if you've never lived this way before. These women were not afraid to learn. They observed, asked, sought knowledge. And here's another mistake of those who live in scarcity. They think they already know everything. They don't want to listen, don't want to change, don't want to learn something new. They stay trapped in the same habits, the same words, the same attitudes, and then they wonder why life doesn't change. Change starts with the humility to learn. And the most powerful learning is the one that confronts you. When you hear something that bothers you, it's because it touched a wound. And an exposed wound is an opportunity for healing. You need to start accepting the discomfort of growth. Changing your mindset takes work. It's tiring at first, it requires attention, it requires vigilance. You'll have to police yourself all the time. You'll need to silence negative thoughts. Reject words you used before without noticing. Change your conversations, your company, your habits. But it's this effort that will take you out of the scarcity cycle. Nothing changes without effort. And the women of the Bible knew this. They didn't delude themselves with shortcuts. They built, and they built with perseverance. Repeat out loud now, I am committed to my new mindset. You need to commit. It's no use just desiring. Desire without commitment becomes frustration, and commitment shows up in daily actions. It's getting up every day and reaffirming who you want to be. It's choosing what to think every day. It's fighting every day against the old patterns that want to pull you back. It won't be easy at first, but after your mind gets used to the new pattern, everything starts to flow more naturally. The women who prospered in the Bible knew this. They understood that the beginning was hard, but they didn't let themselves stop. They had persistence. They knew that change would not come from the outside in, but from the inside out. And that's why, even in complicated situations, they managed to grow. Because their minds were already on another level, and you can reach that level too. It's not about ability. It's about training. It's about insisting until thinking like the rich becomes your normal. Write in the comments, my mind is in a process of transformation. When you write this, you reinforce your decision. You show yourself that you're no longer accepting what has always been, that you're choosing a new path, and that choice has power. Every change begins with a choice. And with each new choice, you open doors you didn't even see before, because the poor mind doesn't see opportunity. It only sees fear. The wealthy mind sees paths. It sees possibilities. It sees ways to move forward, even where others see only walls. These women didn't sit around waiting for help. They created solutions. One of them, in fact, got involved in a project that seemed impossible, but she wasn't intimidated. She used what she had in her hands. She did what was possible. And when you act with what you have, the universe responds. Action activates abundance, but inertia only reinforces scarcity. Don't wait to have everything to start. Start with what you have. Start now, thinking differently, speaking differently, behaving like someone who is already in evolution. And here's a hard truth to accept. As long as you keep behaving like someone who lives in scarcity, even if money arrives, it will slip away, because the mind is not ready to keep it. That's why so many people earn and lose. They improve and go back to the same place, because the external only follows the internal. Want to keep wealth? Align the mind first. Make that a priority. Take care of your way of thinking as if you were taking care of your greatest asset, because that's exactly what it is. Your mind is your greatest asset. These women had this as a rule. They didn't allow poor thoughts to live inside them. And when doubt came, because it comes for everyone, they faced it with affirmations, with focus, with firm attitudes. You can do this too. Today, now. Decide. and then sustain that decision with action. That is what builds the prosperous life you desire so much. Now, if you want to hear more content about wealth continuously, subscribe to the channel and click on the playlist I left here on the screen. I picked the best audiobooks for you to listen to. See you there.